Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome to all of you in our new lecture, lecture 21. My dear students, in our previous lecture, we started a new chapter, chapter 14, in which we discussed some asexual reproduction methods. And today we will start sexual reproduction in plants, and our today's topic, main topic, is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. First we will explain sexual reproduction in plants, and then specifically we will talk about sexual reproduction in flowering plants, and then we will study the pollination process and what are the different types of the pollination. So these are our today's topics. Inshallah, we will explain them. Hope that you people are watching these lectures carefully, and you are just clarifying your concepts. Let's start. First is sexual reproduction in plants. My dear students, plants consist of many groups like bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms. These are the four main groups, and angiosperms. The fertilization process means that the fusion of male and female gametes. The sperm, which is a male gamete, plus egg, which is a female gamete, its fusion is usually called as fertilization if the result zygote is formed. There are many methods of fertilization in these four different groups. Like bryophytes, the sperms are motile. What does it mean by motile? That they are flagellated, so they swim towards the egg. So the fertilization process need a medium called water, and that's why the bryophytes are also called amphibious plants, because they need water for the reproduction process, so they can go there. In the rest of the class, in the rest of the groups, they have different techniques by which the male gamete travel towards the female gamete. But this is somewhat, you can say that this is common thing, that the egg will retain inside the female body, plant body, and the sperm will move towards the egg. This is the common among all the groups, but the methods are different, that how sperm are pollen grain, the male gamete will travel towards the egg. Alternation of generation is a concept we have in plants, in which we have two generations, alternation of generation. First I will write definition of alternation of generation. When sporophyte generation produce gametophyte generation and then gametophyte generation repeat sporophyte generation. This repetition is usually of This repetition of generation is usually called as alternation of generation. The sporophyte generation is a generation which produces spores, and gametophyte generation is a generation which produces gametes. My dear students, usually the sporophyte generation which is diploid generation produce haploid spores. These haploid spores, when germinate, they produce gametophyte generation, which is haploid. And that gametophyte generation produce two types of gametes. This is female gamete, it's a male gamete. And these male and female gamete fuse to form zygote, fertilization occur, and the two-end body or a diploid body is formed, and from that diploid body, the sporophyte generation is produced. This is called alternation of generation. Now, one thing I wish to share with you that the gametophyte generation is the bryophyte are the only plants in which gametophyte generation is dominant. Otherwise, in teratophytes, gymnosperm and angiosperm, sporophyte generation is dominant over the gametophyte generation, and gametophyte generation is dependent over sporophyte generation. But this is only bryophytes. Again, I am repeating, bryophytes is the only class of plants in which gametophyte generation is dominant over sporophyte generation. But in the rest of the classes, the sporophyte generation will be dominant over the gametophyte generation. So this is the concept of sexual reproduction in plants. Now we are moving towards sexual reproduction in flowering plants. In flowering plants. This is important to remind you that only angiosperm plants can produce flower. Only angiosperm plants can. So we can also say sexual reproduction in angiosperms. Rather than angiosperms, none of the group of plants can produce flower. If gymnosperm, no flower. Teratophytes, no flower. The bryophytes, no flower. Only angiosperm can produce flowers. The flower is first of all, what is flower? What should be the definition of the flower? The definition of the flower is not on aesthetic sense that it will be a beautiful structure. Botanically or biologically, its definition is the reproductive part of the plant is called flower. Is called flower. And arrangement of the flowers, if we have single flower, then it is called solitary flower, but if it is in group, the arrangement of flowers in the plant is called inflorescence. Inflorescence is the arrangement of flowers on the plant. Now let's start. four parts flower have usually. First is called calyx. Calyx. Calyx usually are the group of leaves which normally are green in color, and the single member of the calyx is called, it is the outermost role of the flower, and the single member is called sepal. In the bud stage, the sepals are closed. When the sepals open, then the flower opens. So to protect the flower at the bud stage. Second one is corolla. It's the colorful part of the plant which attract the insect. Colorful, and single member of the corolla is called petal. These are the petals. Sepal. Then the third part is called androecium. This is called as a male reproductive part of the flower. It consists of stamen, each stamen consists of two parts, anther and filament. In anther, usually through meiosis, microspores are produced, which germinate to form male gametophyte, are the pollen grains. This pollen grain consists of two nucleuses. The two covering it have, one is external called exine, and internal is entyme, and two nucleuses it have usually. One is called T nucleus or the tube nucleus. And the second one is called G nucleus or generative nucleus. The last part is the gynoecium. Fourth one. Gynoecium. This is in flower, this is stamen. Gynoecium consists of carpels. Each carpel is flask-shaped structure, and it have three parts: stigma, style, and ovary. And ovary consists of ovules. And inside the ovule, we have embryo sac. This is embryo sac. Please listen to this part carefully. The embryo sac consists of two ends. This end is called antipodal end, and this part is called micropyle. And why? Because there is a person called micropyle. This this aperture is called micro. That's why this end is called micropyrite. There is, you can say, a mega cell, mother cell, which is usually diploid, which divide first into two haploid, and then by second meiotic division into four haploid cells, and these four haploid cells then further mitotically divide and form 8 cells. So the total cells, or the total nucleuses we have here are 8. Now what is happening next? That the 4, we have 8 cells in which 3 stay here, and these are called antipodal cells. Antipodal, and 3 stay here, in which one is called egg, and the remaining 2 partners are called synergids. And these are the 6 cells. The 2 cells fuse together in the middle and form a diploid body, which is called as endosperm. Now we have a 7-cell embryo in the angiosperm, embryo sac, in which 3 antipodal cells having haploid nuclei, and 3 cells here in which 1 egg, which is also haploid, and 2 synergids at half. Up to here, I think you people, the concept is clear. Now, let's move towards the fertilization process, that what will occur next. In fertilization process, before pollination will occur, when the pollen grain will reach to the flower, what will happen? And this is the carpel. In which we have embryo, sac, in which there are 3 antipodal cells. We have a 2 endosperm nucleus here, and here we have egg, and the synergids we have. When the pollen grain, which have 2 nucleuses, as approached here, so what will occur? That the tube nucleus will form the tube nucleus will form the tube, and the generative nucleus will be just present. So when generative, the tube nucleus has just the function that it will usually produce the tube. Now generative nucleus or G nucleus will start traveling, and it will insert into the embryo sac, not on the top, but it will come here, because here we have the micropyre opening. So when the generative nucleus start traveling here, mitotically it will divide into 2 sperms again, 2 cells again, 2 nuclei will form mitotically. Now the generative nucleus is divided into 2 nucleuses, and when it will get enter, one it will fertilize the egg. So egg, when egg will be fertilized, resultant a 2n zygote will be formed. Zygote. And in another hand, if it is fertilizing the endosperm, so 2n plus n is equal to 3n, and this type of fertilization is called double fertilization. This type of fertilization is called double fertilization, in which the sperm not only fertilize the egg but also fertilize the endosperm. This is called as double fertilization. So the endosperm will be the future reserve food for the seed. Now, dear students, this whole process is occurring inside the ovary. Inside the ovary there is ovule. The ovule will develop. This ovule will develop into seed, and the ovary will develop into fruit. So in angiosperm, we usually see that the seed is present inside the fruit. Why? Because this whole process occurs inside the ovary, and the wall of the ovary will become the wall of the fruit, and the ovule will develop into the seed. And this type of fertilization, in which the sperm not only fertilize the egg but also fertilize the endosperm nucleus, then this type of fertilization is called double fertilization. But if there is only fertilization of the egg, then we will call it single fertilization. So there are two types of fertilization in plants: single fertilization and double fertilization. So this is all about the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Now let's start the final one of today's lecture, that is the process of pollination. Pollination. Transfer of pollen grains. From anther of filament from anther to the stigma of flower. This transfer is called pollination. There are two types of pollination. One is called self-pollination, in which usually the same flower pollen grains usually come on the stigma of the flower. if the pollen grains of the same flower are coming on the stigma, on the same flower stigma, then this type of pollination is called self-pollination. But if we have pollination between the different plant of same species, for example, same flower we have brassica flower, but this is one plant of brassica. And this is the second one. This is one plant of brassica, this is second plant of brassica. If the pollen grain of this flower is coming to that stigma, and that stigma pollen grains are coming to this flower stigma, then this type of pollination will be called cross-pollination. But it doesn't mean that different plant, same species important. It doesn't mean that the brassica or flower pollen grain will come to the rosa indica flower and we will call it as a cross pollination. No, the pollination will occur between the same, cross pollination will occur between the same species plants, right? So this is called cross pollination. Now there is an issue we have. In self pollination it doesn't require any agency, but in cross pollination we need agencies, and three agencies usually very common: insects and birds, second water, third wind. And according to the agency which carry them, every pollen grain is modified. Like for example, if we have a pollen grain which should be carried by the wind, must have wings which will facilitate it to fly. And water, if the water agency is water, then we definitely need a flat structure pollen grain which should be carried by water. And if an insect, which is called entomophilous flowers, and which usually insect is the source of cross pollination, they must be bright colored, they must have nectar which will attract the insect. Insects will come and the pollen grain will attach with their bodies. When it will visit the next flower of the same species, it will drop them, and thus the process of pollination will be completed. Without pollination, there is no concept of fertilization and pollination. My dear students, it was all about the sexual reproduction in plants. Specifically, we discussed flowering plants and now the pollination. I think it's enough for today. In the next lecture, inshallah, we will start sexual reproduction in animals and we will discuss in detail. Hope that you people got good understanding today. Stay home, stay safe. Allah Hafiz.